The genealogies of Genesis chapter 10 present us with the first enemies list of the Bible. 29 names, including some of the most powerful empires in the ancient Near East and Africa, like Egypt and Babylon, as well as smaller local kingdoms, all either enemies or destined to clash with Israel. And here's the twist. They were all family. According to Genesis, these weren't foreigners. They were cousins, related by blood, and yet they would fight each other, enslave each other, kill each other. How did that happen? We have to ask, why did this list appear in Genesis? And what can it teach us about how we divide the world into friends and enemies, us and them? So welcome to Carving the Bible. My name is Francisco, and on this channel I carve the Bible into granite word for word in an effort to preserve it in a more durable medium than paper that the Bible is normally preserved in. And as I do that, it takes a lot of time, so I have time to reflect on what I'm carving, and these videos are part of that reflection. If you're interested in seeing more about this project, I'll put something in the description below. When the people who wrote the genealogies in the Bible wrote them down, they weren't really researching their ancestors like you or I might do. They did it in part to define themselves, to differentiate themselves from who they were compared to everybody else around them. And this is what's happening in chapter 10 of Genesis. The authors, the editors of this chapter are creating a genealogy, or a set of genealogies of the children of Noah in order to create a geopolitical map of the world so that they can actually say, these are people that we associate and we align with. These are people that we don't align with. And these are people that we really don't know very much about. They're outsiders. All of this is based around the three sons of Noah, Japheth, Shem, and Ham. And the result is what is called the Table of Nations, which is 70 names, in each name in some way associated with a region or a nation or an empire. And as I was reading through these genealogies, I had a hard time with it because at first it just seemed like another set of genealogies, another set of names that I couldn't pronounce, and I wasn't sure what it was really all about. And then I started researching that, and I realized that all of us do the same thing. We still do it today. We create maps in our heads about who we are and who the people around us are and where we fit and where we don't fit. And we don't develop these maps independently. We develop them as part of our group. So we get ideas from family, from friends, from media, from the environment in which we are living. They could be political. So for example, we're not communists. America believes in democracy. Or they could be religion. We're religious, we're not atheists. We are different than those people. I was raised as a Catholic, and although I don't practice anymore. And I remember very clearly that in terms of our religion, the others were the Protestants, whom we suspected because they had rebelled from the church, and we suspected they weren't really Christians, and probably were gonna, unfortunately, end up in hell. But my point is that Genesis 10 is doing exactly the same thing. They're outlining the sets of nations that they belong to and the ones that they don't belong to. The first few verses are from Japheth, or the heirs of Japheth. And these are countries or regions that are just out there that they don't really relate to very well. They're not against them, they're not for them, they're just sort of outsiders. They call them the coastland nations or the island nations. Here's a list of those nations. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but if you're interested, you can refer to the table. Then you have the descendants of Ham and Canaan. These were nations that were considered rivals or threatening in some way, enemies even. They were not to be trusted. For example, Babylon or Egypt or the people of Canaan. Here's a table of the enemies list. Keep in mind that the people who created this list are linking them back to a lineage that is suspect and was cursed by Noah, but according to Genesis, still ancient cousins to the Israelites. What is revealing is that we still create this type of list. In our case, that might be Russia or China, countries that have values that we consider different than our values, and in some ways that we consider a threat, whether it's a political threat, military threat, or an economic threat. The descendants of Shem were considered their ancestors or close relatives. And we have the same types of groups, countries or nations that we associate with, that we have some kind of relationship with, that we don't in general consider a threat. We'll look at the descendants of Shem in more detail in the next video. So Genesis 10 shows us that this impulse to categorize, to create a structure, to define others and ourselves is a deeply human thing, and it probably helped us to survive. So then the question becomes, what do we do with these maps, especially as we change and we learn more and we begin to understand other people more, because those are very potent ideas. When people are labeled as outsiders, the in-group can be very much manipulated by labeling somebody as an outsider, as putting them on the map as an enemy. But let me read you the text that I'm carving in this video. Just remember, I don't know how to pronounce any of these names, so I'm just giving it my best shot. If I make a mistake, I'm sorry about that. And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, and Riphath, and Togarmah. And the sons of Javan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. From these came the distribution of the isles of the nations according to their lands, everyone after his tongue, after their families in their nations. And the sons of Ham, Cush, and Mizraim, and Put, and Canaan. And the sons of Cush, Seba, and Havilah, and Sabata, and Ramah, and Sabtecha. And the sons of Ramah, Sheba, and Dedan. And Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be mighty on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. From that land went Ashur and built Nineveh, and Rehoboth-ir, and Calah. And Resen, between Nineveh and Calah, this is the great city. And Mizraim begot Ludim, and Anamim, and Lebahim, and the Naphtuhim, and the Pathrusim, and the Casluhim, out of whom came the Philistines, and the Caphtorim. And Canaan begot Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgashite, and the Hivite, and the Archite, and the Sinite, and the Arvadite, and the Samarite, and the Hamathite. And afterwards the families of the Canaanites spread themselves abroad. And the border of the Canaanite was from Sidon, as one goes up to Gerar, up to Gaza, and as one goes from Sodom and Gomorrah, and Admah, and Zeboim, up to Lesha. So wow, that list of names, that was really hard to pronounce. You can't believe how many times I had to actually read that so that it comes off across normally on this video. It's amazing how much we still use these kinds of mental maps to define who we are. But as I was saying, when these maps get passed down to us and we change, we have to reevaluate. We have to change those maps sometimes. We have to see which ones are accurate and what are not accurate. I remember when I was a kid, it was communism that was the other. The Soviet Union, China, Cuba. Those were the countries that were the other, that were opposed to us. And then a lot of that changed. Remember the Axis of Evil with George W. Bush. He was talking about Iraq and Iran and North Korea. So our framework, our map began to change. In the same way as I grew up, my mental map of Protestants changed. We treat gays or transgender people as different than us. We're saying they're separate, they're apart. They're in that tribe over there, which is a danger to us, or at least to the way we perceive ourselves. And I'm not saying that these judgments are always wrong. Totalitarian communism, I believe, is an evil. But what I found really interesting about chapter 10 of Genesis is the need to structure the world and to try to place ourselves. It creates a certain stability about who we are based on what the other is. But we also need to take the time to look at the maps that we have, those built-in maps in our head, and make decisions about when those maps really reflect reality and when they really reflect who we are and when they don't.